everyone! Today I am making King Arthur Flour's classic white sandwich bread. I've already gone ahead and measured my ingredients, and they include honey, lukewarm water, instant yeast, salt, softened butter, flour, and dry milk. So a couple notes about these ingredients. The first thing is, when I went to go pull my honey out of my cabinet, I noticed that it was hard as a rock. The thing is, honey never ever goes bad. So you can put it in the microwave, warm it up until it's warm enough that you can pour out what you need. The water that I'm using today is lukewarm. Make sure that it's not boiling hot so you don't kill your yeast. With instant yeast, you can add it right into your flour and mix it up. You don't need to activate it first. If all you have at home is active dry, just go ahead and put it in with some of your lukewarm water, maybe a little bit of honey to waken it up before you add it in. If you have some white whole wheat or some whole wheat flour at home that you'd like to incorporate into this recipe, you definitely can sub out some of the white flour for that. Just know that you may need to add a little bit more water. And then finally, I have dry milk. If you don't have dry milk at home, instead of using the lukewarm water, just use lukewarm milk and you can leave out the dry milk. This recipe calls for one of the simplest dough mixing methods, the straight dough method. Simply add all of the ingredients to your bowl in the order they are listed in the recipe. Now we are going to mix and knead. You can do this by hand or using an electric mixer. I've decided that I'm going to use my stand mixer. It may seem like my ingredients reach a lot higher in the bowl than yours may be at home. I have actually increased this recipe by half so that way I can use my very large bread pan. We are going to mix and knead our dough until it becomes a nice, smooth dough. It won't feel particularly soft, but it should feel elastic and smooth. If you are choosing to use your mixer, you may look around to see what attachments you have. I'm going to use my paddle attachment to mix and my dough hook to knead. Now that my dough has started to become a cohesive dough, I'm going to switch over to the dough hook to knead. Kneading my dough by hand. This is a bowl scraper. They're actually pretty cheap. King Arthur Flour has them for under $2, and it's great to be able to get everything out of your bowl and onto your counter. So at this point, if your dough is really sticky, which mine definitely is sticking to the counter, you can put a little bit of flour down. One of the major mistakes that people make is at this point adding tons of flour to their counter. You don't want your dough to be really dry, so add a little bit at a time as needed. Okay, and this is when the dough scraper can also help that if your dough is really sticky, you can put some flour on your hands, or you can use the dough scraper to just keep moving it around. We're still a little sticky under there, okay? All right, so if you haven't kneaded dough before, you're going to use the palms of your hands. I know a lot of my students try to knead using their fingers. All right, so what we are going to do is you're going to fold it back towards you, turn it 90 degrees, and then push it away again. Fold it back towards you and turn it. Fold it, bring it back, and turn it. If at this point you see that it's starting to get still really sticky again, just put your hands in the flour and add it that way so you're not adding a ton. This dough actually feels really nice, still a little bit sticky, but you can see it's definitely become a smooth dough, which is what the recipe asks for. I used some white whole wheat in mine, which that's why it may look a little bit darker if you're making it at home and you used all-purpose. At this point, you're going to put it into a greased bowl. I recommend just using the bowl that you already used to mix it. It's okay if there's a little bit of dough still on the inside. Just go ahead and you can either add some oil in or use a spray, which is what I'm going to do. Okay, so I've sprayed my bowl and I'm going to lay my dough in. And then after I lay it in, I actually like to flip it back over. So now the top has been greased a little bit too, so it will help it from drying out and also sticking to the plastic wrap that we're gonna put over top. Now if you go and look at your hands and they have a ton of bread dough on them, you don't want to wash that down the sink because you don't want to start growing bread in your pipes, right? So the easiest thing to do is actually use flour and take a flour bath. Just put it in your hands and rub it until all of the dough comes off. Then you can just go ahead and throw that in the garbage. I have covered it with plastic wrap and now I'm going to let it sit for about 60 to 90 minutes till it becomes quite puffy. My dough has been sitting for an hour and oh my gosh, look at it. It's already coming out of the top of the bowl. So it is definitely ready to go. And what you're going to do is turn it out onto your counter and we're going to deflate it a little bit. Okay, so I have gently deflated my dough. This step is called punching, but you're not actually punching the dough. It's a lot less violent than it sounds. And you can see here is my large bread pan that I'm using. This is actually 16 inches by 4 inches. So that's why I had increased the size of my recipe. And what you want to do is kind of press it out until you have a rectangular shape. And the length that you're going for is going to be a little bit shorter than your pan. So if you're using a typical 8 or 9 inch pan, that's where you're roughly going to pat it out to a 7 or 8 inch rectangle. Okay, so that looks about good. It doesn't have to be perfect. The reason that we're going to do this is now we are going to roll it up. And this helps your bread rise even more. So at this point, you can kind of fix it if it looks thicker on one end than the other. And you're going to put it into your greased pan. We're going to cover it again, and then we're going to let it do its second rise before baking. Okay, and this stage is called proofing. The last time we let it rise, that's called bulk fermentation. It's basically the same time, but this time it's rising in its shape that we're going to bake it in. Okay, and you can see here, it is fit into my pan, so I'm gonna go ahead, cover it, and we are going to leave it alone to continue to rise for another hour to an hour and a half. You really want it to be about an inch over the top of your pan. I've let my bread dough rise for another 60 minutes, and you can see it's nicely coming over the top of the pan. At this point, I'm going to put it in the oven at 350 degrees for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I'm going to lightly tent it with a piece of aluminum foil. This makes sure that the top doesn't overbrown before the rest of the bread is baked. You're going to bake it for another 15 to 20 minutes, and the best way to tell if it's done is to stick a thermometer in it and see if it registers 190 degrees or higher. If you don't have a thermometer, there's another trick where you can take the loaf of bread out and knock on the bottom, and if it sounds hollow, it's done. However, in our case, trying to take it out of the pan and do that can be an issue. So you can also just wait to see if it's golden brown and take a chance. All right, so we'll check back in once the loaf of bread is done.